landscape battered by historical amnesia and deliberate distortion, where truth is routinely bent and accountability endlessly postponed. A new generation is pushing back, louder, sharper, and more defiant. At the center of that confrontation stands a 33-year-old academic and activist carrying a name that history cannot ignore and a voice that refuses to stay silent. Tonight, we ask the hard questions. Can moral authority still disrupt a system built on corruption? Is legacy enough, or does this generation need a new kind of courage? Good evening, I am Ox Ballado. This is not nostalgia. This is not symbolism. This is the game changer. We are days away from a milestone that many said would be forgotten by now, the 40th anniversary of the EDSA People Power Revolution. Today, we're joined by someone who isn't just a descendant of that history, but a modern architect of its survival. His name is deeply woven into the history of Philippine democracy. Yet he is forging a direction distinctly his own. Please welcome Kiko Aquino Dee.
Hi, Ox. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so glad that you're able to join us today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
A game changer at that.
Not sure I'm quite there yet, pero sige, let's run with it.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll give justice to that title, pretty much. Anyway, well, first off, you've spent your life in the shadow of giants. You know, in 2026, with the political landscape shifting the way it has. Do you feel like you're defending a legacy, or are you trying to reinvent it for a generation that wasn't even born when your grandmom was president?
I think it's more the former, no? So, I guess how I got involved here was after the 2022 election when President Marcos won. That was something that I was really worried about in the lead up to the May elections, and given how well he was doing in the surveys, it's something that I felt I'd have to come to terms to, that this is the most likely outcome. And what gave me comfort was the idea that, okay, whether Marcos wins, Robredo wins, or whoever else, there's still something I'd like to change about the discourse on my family. And so that's when I forget if it was a little after the election or a little bit before, I asked my family, I'd like to be more active in the Aquino Foundation. The mandate is to preserve the legacies of Senator Ninoy Aquino, President.
Yeah, so you head the foundation, right? Yeah?
Yes, I'm currently the executive director now. And it's Ninoy and Cory Aquino Foundation, but my Tito Noy was also added to the sort of mandate of the foundation after he passed away. So it's really, my thing is telling their story, but I have a belief that, you know, history is really just, it's only history unless it talks to things in the present. No? So I guess it became a bit, I'm not sure if natural is the right term, but it sort of became intuitive to talk about current issues alongside talking about that legacy.
All right, okay. Still with your Lola, the former President Corazon Aquino. What's the one piece of advice she gave you? Not as a leader, but as a grandmother, that you find yourself learning on today's as things get heated online?
Well, I think the one that I remember very distinctly was to pray for your enemies. And I'm not saying I follow it regularly, but I remember, it's a very funny thing kasi in my third year of high school, we had a retreat, no? And then it's common for loved ones to write yung palangkas, the letters for people going on the retreats. And then she said, this was 2008, and then she said at the time, she ended it something like, pray for each other, pray for our country, and especially pray for our president, was President Arroyo at the time, who she was opposed to. And I think it was funny kasi when you're reading the palankas, it's a very emotional moment for the people reading it. And then ako, I think I just laughed out loud when I read that because I remember her saying at one point that when she was opposing the Marcos Sr. regime, the Marcos Sr. dictatorship, things only started changing and the regime only started sort of falling, or the end of that dictatorship only started happening when she found it in herself to start praying for President Marcos. So I got a laugh out of pray for President Arroyo. That's what it really means is pray for something better to replace her. I think. So I think in a way I don't think I can bring myself to do that quite yet about our current president or other politicians I don't care for, but I do hope that something better replaces what we have right now.
Well, importante yun, yung pray for them. Anyway, well, that's your very President Corazon.
Yes, definitely.
Being a devout Catholic. Yeah. Anyway, pag-usapan natin tong the image, the label of being, member of a family na matatawag natin icon of democracy, being an Aquino. What is it like to walk into a room where people already have a preset image of who you are because of your grandparents, Cory and President Cory and the late Senator Ninoy?
Well, I think so. On one hand, I think it's not too different from what other people experience in the sense na wala namang gusto magpahiya sa pamilya nila, di ba? So you want to conduct yourself in a way that's worthy of the sort of legacy that they have, that does justice to it. And I think that's common among everyone. The difference, guys, as you alluded to, people are maybe more likely to know who I'm related to compared to who the average Filipino is related to. So I guess there's an added pressure there. But yun, I think it comes from a place that's common to everyone. We want to do justice to our families, to our loved ones.
But do you ever feel boxed by your surname?
I do think, on reflection, I think I take less risks because of that surname compared to, I think, what other people would do. Because I found out it's true. No? My cousin liked to say that, alam mo, if we ever get our names in like in a headline of a newspaper or something, it won't be Kiko Dee does X, right? It is Apo ni Cory does X, or Pamangkin ni Pinoy does Y, right? So I think that level of that awareness, I think maybe has made me more risk averse, basically. That I'm less willing to do risky things out of fear of maybe sort of tarnishing that legacy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've seen you before with your grandmother, with your mom, but in terms of being active in the political front, you stayed quiet. But what made you join the scene, so to speak?
Well, there's a very specific set of events. No? So I mentioned I started becoming
and up to the president.
Well, growing up, no, but I guess the thing leading to immediately what I've been active with is again in 2022 I asked to become more involved again in the Aquino Foundation. I thought the main things we'd be taking care of were the death anniversaries of the three, Ninoy, Cory, Pinoy. But then come 2023, we found out that a lot of people started asking, what's the plan for People Power anniversary? That was the 37th anniversary at the time. And my answer was, I don't know, I plan to participate in whatever's there. That's not really my job to organize. But then I found that, at that time, I don't really blame the groups, but there's a bit of kumakapa-kapa yung mga tao na how do we commemorate People Power under a Marcos presidency. So the plans were a bit scattered, different groups, and people weren't paying that much attention to it. So I thought, okay, maybe going forward we need to be more focused on commemorating People Power. So we put together a group called the Buhayang People Power Campaign Network in preparation for the 2024 commemoration, right? But 2024 at the start of the year.
So it started way back 2024 pa?
Yes, so our group started 2024. Okay. But sumabay yun sa charter change ni Speaker Romualdez, right? If you recall, at the start of the year, he put out, or their group, I don't know if it was Speaker Romualdez directly, but their group put out that ad na init sa puwera daw tayo ng Constitution kaya dapat palitan na siya. So definitely we couldn't take that lying down, right? So from just commemorating People Power, it became a an anti-charter change campaign, right? And I think that's when I got involved with a lot of these activist groups, and that network sort of stayed when VP Sara had her episode towards the end of the year in November. That group was involved in the filing of the first impeachment complaint against her, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that. And then definitely, like during elections, I campaigned for candidates I support, but then after that, it was back to impeachment. After that, the flood control scan happened, or the big rally started happening in September of 2025, and then tuloy-tuloy lang. So it's just, it's issues I care about. It wasn't really something I was planning to be this active on maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but I'm grateful that I can contribute to these causes that are important to me.
Right. Well, you did mention the name of VP Sara. I'm going to ask you a question as regards the most recent pronouncement that she made out of her, intent to run in the 2020 election. But before that, let me ask you this question.
Sure.
I would certainly love to hear your reaction about it, because I understand that you were one of those who filed one of the impeachment complaints.
That's right.
If I'm not mistaken, that was the second impeachment complaint.
This time around, when
I'm sorry,
it was the second
this
impeachment
is the second
complaint.
impeachment
Right.
complaint. Yeah. But anyway, this one first. How do you honor a monumental history without being trapped by it?
I don't know what the trap is, I guess, because I think it's something that I care about myself, right?
Kasunduan po ng lahat na kailangang palitawin po ang naratibo ng mga biktima ng korupsyon, yung mismong mga biktima ng korupsyon, yung mga napapasukan ng baha sa bahay, at yung mga kailangang tumawid ng baha para magtrabaho, yung mga nagkakasakit, yun po yung palilitawin din po sa programa natin. At kasama din po ang mga testimonya mula sa mga nakakaalam, yung mga witnesses to corruption mula sa iba't ibang sangay ng gobyerno.
And I guess in a way it's more, I wonder about one of my hang-ups before I was active in the Aquino Foundation was what I really care about, having studied political science. Democracy is such a core concept, at least in the way it's taught in UP and in the other schools that I've gone to. The protection of democracy is something that I care about the most. Right?
Yes.
And I think my question at first was, okay, I come from this family, and that family has a powerful legacy, but because of things that happened, a lot of detractors there as well. I was always concerned, is bringing the name of my family into the broader discourse of democracy helpful for democracy, right? Does that give it additional baggage? So that's always something I was a little conscious about. But when 2022 came, what I realized was, well, in the end, the thing that I can actually directly affect, that I can do that nobody else is really, well, not nobody else, but few other people are placed in a position to do something about, is to talk about the name of my family, right? So that's why I've become active in the Aquino Foundation and such. But I think as far as the legacy is concerned, my hope is that the legacy is something that allows me to work on a cause that I really care about, which is democracy. But I guess I'm also, it's also a point of reflection where I ask, like, okay, to what extent are these two things helpful to each other? And it's something I'm constantly trying to revisit. So it's not so much a trap, it's more, these are two related things, like the things I care about and also the legacy that I have. And right now, my assessment is these two things are going in the same direction, so I'm happy to pursue both of them.
If your grandparents are listening and they're present to give comments or reactions on what you're currently doing, what do you think are your grandparents? What would they disagree with you on today?
I think many things. No, they wouldn't want me to be this loud. Very much. Si Lola Correa, remember when I told her that I was planning to take political science in college. Her response was, "Why of all things you could take?" Like, and I honestly believe that I could have said any other course, and she would have been happier with my response. So definitely,
political science.
Yeah. So I think she wanted us to have what she wanted for herself, which is a private sort of life, a quiet, more quiet life. And I'm glad that I've had that for a while. No, I've only been active very recently, so I had that time of privacy. I'm glad that my family gets to continue to enjoy that. But I think right now there's a value to being quiet, and I hope to get back to that at some point. But given what we're facing right now, I think I'm grateful that I can let, at least in the way my network assesses it, I'm glad that my lending my voice to these causes helps progress these causes. No? So medyo like baka sasawayin ako ni Lola in a few years, but right now I think yeah, it's easier to say sorry than to ask permission.
But generally, it's all about you being loud now. You just call it loud, I mean, quote unquote. But you know, during the time of your Lolo Ninoy, I do understand, and everybody will certainly agree that he's one of the perhaps most loudest voices in terms of voicing out the clamor of the Filipino people as regards to the restoration of democracy. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you being you today.
Oh well, I couldn't speak to what Lolo Ninoy would say. I've never met him naman. I hope it's I hope it's resonant. I hope it's in the same direction. But I think in the end, I'm more curious that if we do ever, like if I ever see Lola Cory again, or if I get to meet Lolo Ninoy at some point, I am curious what they would say.
What they would say.
I honestly do not know and would like to know. No? So, yeah.
Okay. Sino si Kiko Dee as a political activist? What does he stand for, and what are his advocacies?
Well, I think democracy is the first thing, and so I think my activism is informed by my own understanding of politics and political science. And one of the ideas that we came up with, that we know in political science, is like the idea of democracy is very basic. No, people should be able to govern themselves. No?
Right.
People should have what they want in terms of like how
the majority
the government works, right? Something to that effect. But that idea, I think, as time went on, ended up becoming balanced by the idea of human rights. And like, okay, the majority should have what it wants, but there are limits to that, right? You can't, even if the majority says that, say, this person has to die, that won't fly because that violates sort of human rights. So for me, what's important is, in democracy, how do we find that balance? Where I think today the balance maybe has gone sort of against human rights and more towards just, okay, people can get whatever they want no matter what. So that's like the populist side of democracy. So for me, I feel that the right to life is extremely important.
Right.
Freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, all of these things are very important. And these are the first things I would sort of ring the bell on when we see violations of that. And then I guess the next layer is when we talk about the current issue that we have right now, corruption. The way I think of it, aside from corruption just being theft, which is wrong in itself, it's also it's a theft that sort of has so many downstream effects. When corruption, when money from public services goes to corruption, then those services aren't provided, meaning people have to find their own ways to make their way in the world, and that can lead to conflicts, that can lead to further that can lead to crime, that can lead to further
even
chaos
for that
rights,
matter.
chaos, right? So I think that kind of corruption is also something that's important to be speaking loudly about, which is what we're doing now.
Okay. Well, legacy isn't a statue; it's a living thing. So when we come back, we confront how Kiko is weaponizing legacy in the digital age, and how the 40th anniversary of the EDSA People Power Revolution is colliding with another Trillion Peso March. History is not just being remembered, it's being challenged. Stay with us.
We multiply the good for Filipinos nationwide. We drive learning. We promote wellness. We help rebuild lives. We turn hope into possibilities. We care for our players. We advance digital skills and employment. We bridge accessible healthcare to the underserved. respond in times of disaster. We grant wishes that bring hope and opportunities. We champion responsible entertainment.
With this project by Bingo Plus Foundation, it really could help a lot of students and ignite their hope to innovate, to love science, to pursue research in academic, but also in their professional life.
Wala na yung mga dumi galing sa tubig, malinaw. Safe na po yung tubig namin. Thank you!
Kayo po ang ilaw ng aming buhay at tahanan po. Sa loob po ng 20 years, nagkailaw din po kami.
Maraming salamat kasi natupad yung kahilingan ko po na magkaroon ng sariling tindahan. As in, sobrang saya po namin mag-ina.
I think what DigiPlus and Bingo Plus is doing is really remarkable, and I really affirm you guys for that kasi like this one is a very big step.
Together, let's help Filipinos thrive and win in life.
The big milestone here. So we're seeing the Trillion Peso March planned for February 25th, and activities from the Buhay, ang People Power Network, the one that you mentioned earlier. Well, as a co-convener, what is the vibe of the EDSA 40? Is it more of a celebration or a protest?
Definitely, I think it's
general.
more protest than celebration because of the crises we're going on right now. But I think for me personally, and I hope that people also sort of pick this up, I think it's a serious time for self-reflection. No? I wasn't there in '86, no, but when the people, like people in my groups, people in my family talk about it, it's such a high time for the Philippines. No? Parang we freed ourselves from a dictatorship. Nobody expected that it would happen that way, that it would be peaceful, that it would be, and that it would be such a radical shift from what was going on for so many years of the dictatorship. But it's also clear to see that we've fallen short of that in the 40 years that have happened. And there are many reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with the political leadership that we've had, and that's why we're engaging in protest right now. But I also think that in a democracy, if we really became a democracy after '86, that means we have some responsibility for what's been happening now too. And so I think it's important for everyone. I think for those of us who've been involved that whole time, it's especially important to be reflective and ask, what was our contribution to this mess, right? And sort of acknowledge that. But even more importantly, going forward, the question to ask is, okay, how do we move forward from it? How do we become part of that solution? So
some say that this is an attempt to erase the day's significance. So how do you keep the people power spirit alive when the red tape seems to be working against the celebration?
Well, I would comment that it's funny. Like I think very few people characterize President Marcos, the current President Marcos, as aggressive. No, but I do think that at least in this area of historical distortion, I think he's more aggressive than the previous administration. Because what we saw under President Duterte was the holiday would still be there, Malacanang would still put out the sort of fairly generic people power statement that we should all value democracy and everything. And you're just left with the cognitive dissonance of this is what it says in the statement, but here's what he's doing with all of the EJKs and the violations of freedom of speech, the panggigipit sa ABS-CBN and all of that. So you're left with that cognitive dissonance. Here with President Marcos, he moved 2 EDSAs ago, he applied holiday economics. Then last year and this year, he made it a special working day, right? So again, in my view, yes, to diminish the importance of that date. And when he puts out statements, I don't recall his last people power statement, but I recall the one he put out during during the Ninoy Aquino Day last year in August, and he said something to the effect of, now that we have a more complete view of history, we can assess like this, like that. And then in my head, it's like, I don't think history becomes more complete when you add lies to the truth. No? Another layer to it is all of this corruption is happening, and we are.
Which
like 40 years of EDSA is being bookended by the two most corrupt administrations. The Marcos Senior administration that we kicked out, that was the world record holder for greatest robbery of a country, and then the current Marcos Junior administration, which is, at least as far as the amounts that we're looking at is concerned, seem to have surpassed what was linked to his father. So I think it's massive, and again, it requires self-reflection, I think, because how did we get here? Definitely other people were more guilty of that, but again, how did we allow this to happen? And more importantly, how do we stop it from happening and prevent it from happening again?
4 decades, 2 scores, 40 years
Right.
after EDSA. Has the promise of people power been betrayed? What do you think?
To an extent, I think my belief is that people power succeeded because we became a democracy again. We got a say again in this country. And that's, I think, by that measure, it's a success because to this day we have democratic elections, right? Notwithstanding sort of controversies under President Arroyo, and there are always going to be questions about the vote counting machines, I think, in COMELEC. But I think the broad opinion is that the elections that we've had are imperfect but free and fair by some minimum standard, right? And so the people are able to have a say as to who gets elected, right?
Well, sa panahon ngayon, marami nagsasabing laos na daw ang EDSA, nawala na ang magic nito, at pagod na ang mga tao. Ano masasabi ng isang Kiko Aquino Dee sa statement na to?
Well, tingin ko kasi nakikita ko kasi sa mga kabataan na nakakatrabaho, totoo naman na parang hindi na ganun ka-resonant yung terms na people power o EDSA sa kanila. Pero parang lumalabas pa rin sila eh. Like, I remember specifically before the first Trillion Peso March, September 21, a week before that, may lumapit sa akin ng mga college students lang din. Never met them before, pero nag-cold call lang sa akin na, would you like to join itong protest na in-organize namin? Tapos nalaman ko na lang, first time nila mag-protesta, first time din nila mag-organize ng protest, di ba? So people really people much younger than me came out on the streets nung September 21 to protest the crisis that we're facing right now. So ako parang that's people power even if you don't want to call it that. No? So I think kung yung mismong label ng people power ay hindi na ganun ka-resonant, that desire to sort of take responsibility for what's happening in our countries and do something about it. I think hindi yun lost sa current generation, and I'm hoping that's something we can build on. I guess in terms of, as far as the legacy is concerned, I'm hoping that's something we can bridge. No, na the sort of the movement that I guess my family contributed to in the past, I see a lot of continuity there. Pero kung hindi man ma-bridge yun, at least that sort of civic engagement, that sort of sense of responsibility for the country still persists.
Well, let's stroll down memory lane. EDSA, people power, like during the time of President Aquino's transition from Marcos to Aquino, now EDSA DOS, like GMA to,
Right.
ERAP to GMA, and some would label it now as a very divisive, as people would invoke EDSA. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a bit about EDSA DOS. No? Kasi the People Power Revolution, EDSA 1. I think that's unquestionably, that was the right thing to do, and we should be proud that we did it. No?
Yeah.
Parang kicking out the dictator through peaceful means. No? Parang that was sort of as close to a pure political good as you can have, which is very rare. No?
In whatever
pure
sense
good in
you
politics.
use the justification out of
Yeah, I think parang very
the
clearly
outcome.
that's something to be very proud of, no?
Yes.
That we were able to do that. The second EDSA revolution, definitely there was rampant corruption during the time of President Estrada. And definitely people had the right to call for his impeachment, call for his resignation. So I wonder sometimes about EDSA DOS in terms of, we were talking about like my sort of how I think about democracy, no? And so that's something I think about, no? Parang was that the right use of people power? That's because I think it's a very powerful tool in our history, and I think it's important to be judicious in the way that it's used. I would say that just for
Yes.
academic purposes, if you were to ask me who has deserved to to be removed by a People Power Revolution after the first one, I would say that President Arroyo, President Duterte, and President Marcos all probably deserved it more than President Estrada. Now I'm being biased there because I left out one person who I care a lot
Yes,
in the
of
middle,
course.
no. But yun, I think if our standard is yun, People Power, the second People Power or the second EDSA revolution was like a good model, then I think then there have been so many crises that have been worse than what we had under President Estrada that maybe merited it. But in my head, I'm also thinking, okay, maybe should we have been more judicious about the use of that tool in 2001? Which is why I think my concept of the current crisis of corruption is what I want to see as an electoral revolution. I want us to turn our backs on these corrupt officials.
Right.
No? And there's grounds to say that we can do that. No? I think a lot of people point out that Bong Revilla, for instance, was re-elected after the PDAF scam in 2013. But what people don't appreciate, I think, or fail to appreciate, is that he was the #1 senator in 2010, something like 19 million votes, if I'm not mistaken. He got dropped to like 14 or 15 million. 4 million people changed their minds about
Yes.
Bong Revilla because of that scandal. And that's something to build on. No? That means that there are people who care about this issue of corruption. And the stronger story there is Jingo Estrada was kicked out. He wasn't re-elected in 2000.
With what's happening now, are we commemorating victory or confronting this kind of unfinished business? I think there's still more to do, right?
Yeah, definitely it's both. No? I think it's important to commemorate the victory, if only to remind people that we do have power in this country. Right? That was the point of People Power, that it's not one person who has power. That was what was happening from 1972 to 86. No? And we changed that situation. We took power into our own hands. So we need to remember that, in contrast to what the powers that be would want us to believe, that pare-pareho lang sila, that there's nothing that we can do, kumilos man kayo, ito pa rin yung mangyayari. No, we do have power, right? And then from there, the question is, okay, what do we want to do with that power? And I think what we're seeing in the 40th anniversary is there are many concepts of what to do with that power. Like, again, I gave you my pitch, which is this electoral revolution. Other people maybe want something more radical. Other people maybe just want to re-elect what we have right now. Other people might want to go back to the brutality of the Dutertes. All of these options are available to people. And I definitely have one that I'm pitching compared to all the others. But I think the point of People Power is, okay, here are the options, you choose. What do we want? Do we want to go back? Do we want to stay where we are? Do we want to go forward? Do we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or do we want to keep the baby? Parang
Go
that's
against,
everyone's
or you be a pro status quo, or what?
Yeah, and that's everyone's choice. And again, like, I am vocal about this is what I want to happen. But the point of People Power is not dapat masunod yung gusto ko, which is, I think, the opposite of People Power. The point of People Power is, we have the power and we decide where we go. We as a whole, we the Filipino people, not one person.
In
we
general,
the Filipino people have a say as to where we're going to go.
All right. Okay, who should be held accountable now? At nasaan ang naging mali, if there's any, at bakit bumabalik na naman ang tao sa EDSA?
Well, I think when you ask who should be held accountable now, siguro I'm thinking specifically about the current flood control crisis. And
I really want you to be very particular about it.
So I think what we're seeing is some big fish arrested that are appropriate.
Yes.
I think so. See, Senator Bong Revilla again has been tried, and I think more importantly is the incumbent senators who are having cases filed against them, because that shows that, okay, no matter who you are, no matter what station in life you have, if you commit a crime like this against the Filipino people, then there will be something, you will have to face the consequences. No? So, but I also think I also think that if the focus is only on the Senate, hindi sapat yun, diba? There's another branch that did a lot of hanky-panky.
That also
then,
has
right?
to be
that also has to be there.
scrutinized.
Yeah, and so Zaldico is abroad, so hopefully we can get him to come back home. But who are the other people involved in that story, right? What happened to former Representative Kimbo, who was the vice chair of the Committee on Appropriations? What happened to
Stella
Speaker
Kimbo,
Martin Romualdez, who... So I think all of these people need to be held accountable, and all the way up to while I think that the specific evidence linking President Marcos himself to the corruption issues need to be scrutinized. No, there's there was the video messages of Zaldico implicating him, and also these texts that came from that allegedly came from Representative Leandro Leviste that sort of mentioned that the money that was received by allegedly President Marcos yes, that should be, that should be viewed with some shred of doubt,
All right.
right? But I do think that should have sort of, there should have been an opportunity to interrogate those narratives, right? And the
Yes.
impeachment against President Marcos could have been that opportunity, and it was shut down before that evidence could have been presented at the
presented, yeah.
Commission of Justice. So that's
Yeah.
that's disappointing. But I hope so at least as far as that's concerned, we're pushing for the passage of the IPC bill in the Senate, the ICA-IC bill in the House of Representatives, so that there's a body independent of Malacanang that can sort of be a venue where these questions can be answered.
All right. Well, we'll continue with the discussion. Okay, we'll just pause for a break. Well, the march may ignite the moment, but what happens after the noise fades? When we return, we go beyond symbolism into specifics. What concrete actions are being demanded? This is where conviction meets strategy. Stay with us on The Game Changer.
The best players succeed because they set boundaries. Every great athlete wins with control. Always have a game plan.
Bubusugin ang inyong umaga. Gigisingin ang inyong diwa sa mga makabuluhang isyu ng bayan, sa mga trending at usap-usapan. Balitang malaman, huwag ng pagtalunan. Dahil dito, walang bola, puro tama. Walang bola, puro tama. Walang bola, puro tama. Kasama si George Bandola. Ano pang hinihintay nyo? Tutok na sa masayang komentaryo sa balat ng Digital TV. Walang bola, puro tama. Kasama si George Bandola. Dito lang sa balat ng Free-to-Air TV. DA-TV, Channel 31 sa inyong mga TV box.
We're back, and still in our conversation tonight is Mr. Francis Joseph Aquino Dee. This is The Game Changer. Well, we've covered the history and the symbolism. Now it's time for specifics. What are the concrete calls to action, and where does the EDSA Foundation go from here?
Well, so in terms of for the Trillion Peso March now, which is
Yes.
again coinciding with the 40th anniversary of People Power, we'll be there at People Power Monument all day basically, but 3 p.m. is the main program. The main call, syempre, hindi nawawala yung ikulong lahat ng mga kurakot, right? And as I was sort of discussing earlier, while we're seeing some progress in terms of who are being arrested, there's still some very big names that people seem to be silent about. No? So we want to make sure that accountability hits everyone who's involved in the corruption crisis. So we're calling for, while again, it's good that there are people being arrested, we want this to continue. Parang we don't want it to stop. Second, I think the Trillion Peso March has always been also associated with the anti-dynasty cause. No? And so again, we're calling for the passage of an effective anti-political dynasty bill. No? So there are many versions being discussed in both houses of Congress. And then I think the third, also as I mentioned earlier, was the passage of the Independent People's Commission bill in the Senate and the Independent Commission Against Infrastructure Corruption bill in the House. Because again, these are bodies that can investigate the corruption scandal with a mandate independent of Malacanang, so you can finally get to the bottom of what happened or what was the alleged role of the president as far as these corruption issues are concerned.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you mentioned about corruption as one of the major issues and political dynasties. Well, this 40th anniversary theme explicitly actually mentions the fight against those things. You know, again, corruption and dynasties. Well, many people also feel like the EDSA project failed because those dynasties are still here. How do we finish what was started in 1986?
Again, I think, I've talked about sort of people power being a time for self-reflection. And I think it's also important to reflect on that. Now, one of the big promises of the 87 Constitution, and it's there, in fact, the text, that we want to prohibit political dynasties. We want to end the influence of political dynasties in the Philippines. And we haven't been able to achieve that. In fact, I think it's fair to say it's only gotten worse.
Notwithstanding the many attempts coming from the law.
many attempts from the law, and I think
Yeah.
we've seen electoral successes as well, right?
Mhm.
You have cases like Grace Padaka in Isabela,
Oh, yeah.
Kakabagao in the Dinagat Islands, Among Ed in Pampanga. Like, you have these isolated cases of, yes, there are dynasty slayers out there, but the general trend has been for the influence of these few families to expand. No? And so I think, again, that requires some self-reflection. On the one hand, why do we need a law against dynasties in the first place when sort of we're seeing all of this corruption going on and the people perpetrating them, if it's not the same people themselves, it's the same names who are getting involved in these scandals again. So how come we aren't able to kick these people out using elections without this kind of assistance? No? But I think, so on the one hand, I think it's not enough to pass an anti-political dynasty law. I think we need to be very vigorous in campaigning for candidates who just even more basic than just having the same sort of having sort of the kind of platforms that would help people, just electing representatives who actually represent our people. No, like our House of Representatives looks nothing like the average Filipino, right? So are very few people there. No, it's a very different sort of background, and we want to have a more diverse looking Congress, a more diverse looking political leadership.
Are you here to stay, or by that, tatakbo ka ba in 2028?
Oh, definitely.
Or will you stay side ng civil society?
Honestly,
No, many would ask this question, and it's going to be very interesting.
So again, so I try to head it off right away. No? So definitely not.
Yep, okay.
I have no interest in seeking elected office. In terms of my activism, I think it's something that I'm constantly assessing. No? Because while, again, I told my story na 2024, originally it was just about commemorating people power, Charter Change got involved, and then I ended up working with a lot of these groups on a whole bunch of issues. I got involved in things in the West Philippine Sea, I got involved in the impeachment of President, Vice President Duterte, all of these things. I think I definitely want to continue to contribute to these issues, but I'm also aware that my main mandate is to focus on like the legacy of Ninoy, Cory, and Pinoy, and in a very concrete way. Sometimes that I think a lot of the times that contributes, sometimes it gets in the way, in the sense of, for instance, today for People Power. I think I spent more time than I really needed to sort of listening in on debates on what color should we wear on Feb 25. Is it white because it's a Trillion Peso March? Is it yellow because it's People Power, and it's that whole story? And on the one hand, like being in charge of like these broader causes, I can appreciate, okay, white is the color of the Trillion Peso March, walang kulay yung corruption. We need to be inclusive about this issue, because whether you're pro Marcos, pro Duterte, Dilawan, Piklawan, whatever,
You're welcome.
affected, you're welcome, and you're affected by the corruption, right? So we need to be inclusive there. On the other hand, the yellow legacy is something that's very important to me. And that's something that I never want to be viewed as shying away from. It's not perfect, but I'm proud of it still, right? And so I think coming from that experience, I'm thinking maybe the sort of broader calls, I'm happy to be contributing to it at the level I am right now, but I wonder if maybe these broader movements against corruption are better led by someone who represents that a bit more, na walang kulay yung corruption. Because my original intent has always been, all of these things are very important, but the legacy is also equally important to me, and I want to work on that as well. So in terms of, am I going to be around? Yes, definitely I'm going to be around. I'm hoping I'm hoping to maybe not be in the news quite as often, but definitely, even in these protests, I've always been happier in the audience than in the backstage. And I hope to be doing a bit more of that, not just being there, getting a feel for the crowd. If I can help, I will help, but I'd like to, I'd like to also get back to what I originally committed to, which was talking about the legacy, talking about history.
For those joining the rally and those watching the prayer rallies, what is the next step after the anniversary ends? Will there be more, or what are the subsequent steps you might
we've
take?
never announced sa Trillion Peso March. No, we've never really announced the next one right after or before the current one concludes. So I have nothing to announce as far as a fourth edition is concerned. Based on the way the issue is progressing, I think it's likely that there'll probably need to be another one if like there's certain big fish like Speaker Romualdez, who continues not to be directly investigated in terms of corruption. But in terms of what people can do, definitely the protests are important, and I believe that. No, I believe a lot of the progress that we've seen on the corruption issue would not have happened if there weren't these mass protests. So definitely that's important. But in terms of what else we can do, I think there are a lot of volunteer efforts that are emerging right now as far as the anti-corruption issue is concerned. I know that, for instance, the CBCP through Caritas Philippines is deploying volunteers to assist in the assessments of DPWH projects. So the monitoring, the discovery of the discovery of these ghost projects. That's something that people can very easily volunteer for. Like you just need a pair of eyes and you need a pair of feet to go to these places.
Well, thank you for sharing or spending a portion of your most valuable time today. It's really an honor to have you in the show. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you tonight.
I'm grateful for the invitation, Sir Ox, and grateful for everyone listening, for everyone watching. And yeah, see you on the 25th, Feb 25, 3 p.m., People Power Monument. And again, in all of these other protests, kung ano man yung papel ko backstage or in the audience, I'll definitely be around.
At this point, we had a serious and intense conversation, so let's lighten things up a bit, just a little bit. So we're going to play a short game called Spotify. Okay, the Kiko Aquino Dee playlist. Now, here's how it works, Kiko. Okay, we'll give you the names of different personalities, and you tell us the very first song that comes to your mind and why. All right, no overthinking, just your first instinct, first track. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, sige, game.
All right,
although I think I'll be exposed for having very weird musical taste, but sige.
Okay, well, let's just get the ball rolling then. Okay, let's spin the playlist. Former President Corazon C. Aquino.
I don't think people will know this song, but it's called In Loving Memory by a band called Alter Bridge. So it's a song about someone who passed away. So. Yeah.
Okay. All right. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
The Scientist, not because of the song, but because of the band Coldplay.
VP Sara Duterte.
Crawling by Linkin Park, kasi it seems like there's something that wants to come out of VP Sara Duterte.
Senator Riza Ontiveros.
Ooh, that's a good one. Gosh. Yeah, I feel like yung fight song, I forget who sang it, but this is my fight song, that one. So that's, I think a woman leader like her, I think I associate a lot with that kind of song.
All right, that's cool. Okay, people keeping the EDSA spirit alive.
Ay, handog ng Pilipino sa mundo. Sorry, boring answer, but that's it.
Source of an anthem. All right, yeah, so we keep going. Before we part ways, what makes Kiko Dee a game changer?
What makes me a game changer? I don't know. Parang I think a lot of the things I've been working on, I'm happy to be working on them no matter what. But I haven't, corruption is still really, really bad. Wala pang nakukulong, wala pang na-impeach. So I don't know if I can claim to be a game changer. But I hope that, if people sort of see in me something that's inspiring, then maybe they'll be the ones to change the game.
All right. Again, thank you very much for your time. It is really an honor.
Thank you very much, Sir Ox.
Thank you. 40 years after EDSA, the battle is no longer about remembering the past. It's about defending the future. Democracy is not sustained by legacy alone. It is sustained by vigilance, by accountability, by citizens who refuse to look away. EDSA at 40 is not just a milestone. It is a mirror. The question is not who carries the name. The question is who carries the responsibility. Because in the end, a true game changer doesn't just enter the arena. He changes the rules. I am Ox Ballado, and this has been The Game Changer. Good night.